Barbara Vigue from Me to the Word Ministries, and I'm here to continue talking about healing the mind. And one of the areas that I'm going to talk about really rather rapidly is about healing relationships. And when I say it that way, it's a disclaimer because I did marriage counseling with some people years where they would continually have to come back and just get refreshed about things. But so as a counselor, I will tell you that this is a very short presentation. I'm just going to look at one particular area, and if the Lord wills, then we'll continue maybe with some other areas. But I wanted you to know that off the top that I can't give you all the answers that you may be looking for right now. But I will tell you who has all the answers, and that's Jesus. And like everything else in our lives, folks, you need to be in a relationship with, number one, Jesus Christ. And go to your Father and talk to him about things that are going on in your life. I like to call God the divine psychiatrist because there are things that he knows about me that I don't even know about me. And he will be able to help me through those things and give me direction. So I pray if you get nothing else, you will know that that's what I'm saying, is our answers are always, always found in the Lord. Okay? But when you talk to him, there's a very important verse that is one of my theme verses that's found in Isaiah chapter 1. Lord, make me willing and obedient. Willing and obedient. Sometimes we're one and not the other. We say we'll be obedient, but we're not willing to hear what he has to say. And so we need both of those. We need to be willing. And then sometimes you pray, God, make me willing to be willing. Okay? And really, it is so important when you're dealing with the area of relationships. So I'm going to focus on just one area, and that's called communications, because that's kind of a foundational part to having a relationship. And I'm going to give you an example from my own life, because I think that then people don't get so offended, if I'm saying this about me. But there was a time I remember, and the funny part is I don't honestly remember what I actually got mad about, but I was upset with my husband and just not being myself, because I'm not usually kind of a bad-tempered person. So after about 3 days, I was talking to him, but limited, and I was just not myself. And he finally said, "What's the matter? You're acting different. What's the matter?" And, for a minute, I couldn't really remember why I was acting different, and that's the truth about our relationships. Why Jesus said, don't let the sun go down on your wrath, because, you wake up and you're still mad and you don't even know what you're mad about. So I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, oh, yeah, 3 days ago you said something like, oh, you're putting on a little weight. And he said to me, I am so sorry. I never meant that to be something so hurtful for you that you'd be so upset. I just didn't even mean it that way. And I said, it's not your fault at all. It's mine. Because if it offended me, if it upset me, why didn't I say something then? Instead of let it sever, just stick down there in your gut until you see. The important thing was, if he hadn't said that, I don't know how long would I have gone without knowing what I was mad about. And I had to think about it. What actually is going on here? I want to start off just because I think it's kind of fun. I did this with high school students, and we had some fun with it. But talking about the different personality types, and it's a course. It's just an overview of it. But I have done 4 usually accepted personality types, and there's the passive person. And the passive person says, I really don't care, do whatever you want, that's fine with me. And they don't care. But that's not a healthy way to live, folks. And the example that we did with the high schoolers, we talked about everybody being at the mall and you want to go and get something to eat. The passive person will say, well, really, I don't care, whatever the majority or whatever the people want to do. That sounds really nice. But after a while, it's a little hard. It's hard on that person, and it's hard on the people you're with, because you never have any feedback into the group. Okay, and then the next one is just the opposite. Now, the passive person says, I consider you, but I don't really consider me as having any opinion. But the aggressive person is just the opposite. I consider me, I'm not really considering the rest of you. These kind of people, especially if they're nice people, they don't see them as doing anything inappropriate. They see themselves as just the leader. I just because we are the leaders and we just take leadership of it. And so that group that's going out to figure out something to eat, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. What they want is what everybody else will go out and do. And then we have, probably the majority of us fall into this unhealthy personality type, passive aggressive. They're the kind of person who will look like they're passive in the beginning, but they're not really the passive personality, because what they're actually going to do is twist you or do something, be a sarcastic remark, or maybe gossip about you behind your back, or what. They will be aggressive, but they're just passive looking. And so, in other words, the example I'm using about getting something to eat, they may have really wanted, let's say, chicken, but the aggressive person wanted pizza. So they go out, they don't say anything, they go out and they have that pizza, and then they sit there and they just say, this is the worst pizza place I've ever seen, this is the worst pizza I've ever eaten. It's just the twist that goes on that they do. Now, what's our healthy person? The healthy person is called the assertive person. They're calm, they're confident, and they don't have to make you do what they do. They're not aggressive, but they're going to tell you how they feel about something. And it's really important that we learn how to do that, because it doesn't come natural. Like I said, the majority of us probably are passive aggressive. Now, I had an example with my husband. I found out that he really liked history, which I love too, but I'm not particularly crazy about war movies. And when we would say, he would say, well, we'd sit down and watch television or something, or put on a movie. Back in our day, it was the VHS. And he'd say, what do you want to watch? Well, after being married a certain length of time, I became passive, because I knew that if I said, oh, let's watch a Jane Austen movie or something like that, he's going to go, no, I'm not going to watch that. And I know that he's going to say no to whatever suggestion I have until we get to a Vietnam War movie or a World War II movie or something like that, especially World War II, because his dad was in the front lines there. And so what I ended up doing is I would say, and mean it, I don't care. To me, the best part was just to get to be sitting next to him watching it, and eating our popcorn. But that's what I mean, is you don't want to live your lifestyle like that, okay? Sometimes you need to speak up, especially if it irritates you. It didn't irritate me at that point. So it's important that you begin to understand, what do you like? Because a lot of times the passive people will say, I'm just a nice person, I just don't make a deal about anything. And the aggressive person says, I'm just a leader. But you better know yourself and know that there are times when you need to speak. And so what I would teach people in the years of my counseling, forgive the not so modern graphics here. But make yourself if you got a piece of paper, you take notes or anything, you can make yourself a triangle. And number 1 is going to say affirm. Number 2 up on the top is assert. And number 3 is action. And I'm going to talk to you about those with some examples. All right, number 1 is you affirm. Now, remember something. In most cases, Jesus used this when he was talking to the churches. He had a hard time with some because some of them didn't have anything good to say about, but he tried. And so he would say, I see your good works. You're doing this great, and this is great, and this is great. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is affirm. And affirm, for instance, is there should be something. If this is a friend of yours, if this is a mate of yours, even a parent-child relationship, there should be something nice that you can find to say about it. I had somebody recently ask me about working with an employer, and, find something that you can say, like, I appreciate how hard work you put into this job that you do, okay? So find something, and I'll give you some more examples in a little bit. The second one, the one up on the top, says, now here's where we get to assert. And this is very interesting because it says that the way that you can do this is to say, you know what? For instance, what I could have done with that example with my husband, and says, honey, when you said that I looked like I was getting fat, that hurt. That hurt my feelings, and it made me feel self-conscious, whatever it made me. I don't remember. But you know what? Most people, when I get to this, you know what they'll say? When you did that, I'm angry. Now, there's something important you have to remember here. What happens if you go into something swinging and yelling? I remember one married couple I was telling, I said, you're like a machine gun, your husband comes home from work and you hit him with everything that you're upset about for the day. And is it any wonder he didn't want to come home anymore? So, you've got to understand that there is a way to talk to people, and if you are yelling at them, are you condemning them, or you're attacking them? And, people love to say, that's just me, I had to get it out. There's a way to get things out. The Bible tells us every man to speak to his brother in love. Speak the truth, but speak it in love. So what we want to do is, when you say something like, when you did such and such, or when you don't do such and such, this is how it makes me feel. And you see, feelings aren't necessarily right. And you have to know that. You could be wrong about your feelings, okay? And especially if you don't share them, because then that person never knows what you're upset about. But you have to go in there knowing you said something positive to them. And now you're saying, however, when this happened, this is how I felt about it. And you leave that door open because it's your feelings, it's not fact. Okay? That's important for you to remember. So when you're saying, this is how I feel, this is how it made me feel, you're opening, and you know what? I was going to say, you're opening the door to understand yourself, because sometimes when somebody is talking to me and I'm teaching this, and I say, how did that make you feel? And angry. I was really angry. No. And what was behind the anger? What made you angry? And just like with that incident with me, sometimes you have to think about it. What exactly is troubling me? What exactly is bothering me? I remember once when we were grown kids and we came back to visit Mom and Dad, and Mom's not and she's the sweetest woman in the world, but she wasn't talking to Dad that day. And we were, thank God for her grandkids, because they said, "What's the matter, Grandma?" And she would talk to us, but she wouldn't talk to my dad, who is sitting there looking with kind of a grin on his face, which probably didn't help how she was feeling. But somebody had given him a dog, and he was real excited, and he brought the dog home. And my mother was mad. She was mad at him because now we always had dogs. So I don't think, well, we even, at that time in their life, they even had horses. But I don't think it was the dog. There was something else going on. And my dad was wise enough to say, Mary, what's really troubling you here? And she said, you don't ask me before you make business decisions in his company. And she really wasn't one of the managers. She was, of course, the wife of one. But that was what was troubling her. And you know what? She went back years ago. Years ago, you decided such and such, and you didn't ask me. And my father's sitting there like, what? You know, he was still kind of grinning. And he goes, well, Mary, honey, and he was able to smooth it out. I shouldn't really tell you this end of the story, but, another time we were together, and they were fine. They were their normal selves. And one of the grandkids again goes, Grandma and Grandpa, you're talking to each other. Or Grandma, you're talking to each other. Grandpa never talked, never stopped. But Grandpa said, yeah, oh yeah, everything's all straightened out. That's all fine. I get to, she goes, he's keeping the dog. And my father says, yeah, but I have to take her to Italy. And that's exactly what I'm going to be teaching you. That's the third one. Action. Find out what you can agree upon that'll work this thing out. Now, I said I'd give you some examples to explain it. I had a lady come to me. Her husband didn't come, just her. And she said, I don't know if I can stay in this marriage because my husband works, and he comes home from work, and he turns on the TV, and he lays on the couch, and I make supper. I was home all day with the little kids. I make supper. I have to clean up everything by myself. Then I have to give them the bath. And every night we have the same fight. And she yells at him and says, you never help me. And he's going, I worked all day. Who's paying for everything, Well, anyway, so it went on until she said, I don't know that my marriage can be saved. And we started to work on these principles. And I said with the affirm, what can you say positive about your husband? You can say, honey, I appreciate that you work hard all day. And you do supply the money so that I can be a stay-at-home mom here. And I just want you to know, I do appreciate that. I don't take that for granted. Okay? Affirm him. He got a little suspicious, she said. Well, what's this? When she didn't fight with him. And then she said, and this took a while with me working with her, because she's the one who said, oh, makes me so angry. He should be helping. He should do that. Those are two words. Should. Always. Never. That you use in a fight that aren't really productive. So she said to him next, I had to help her figure out what was making her angry. And finally, I was so proud of her. She did such a great job. She said, but you know what? When you never want to help me here in the house or with the kids, I feel separated from you, and it scares me. I feel like maybe you don't love me anymore. Well, she had a really good example that didn't work out perfectly, because he said, oh, really? Are you just trying to kind of manipulate me into getting, if this is some kind of new tactic, I'm not falling for it, And she said, no, I'm not going to do the next step, because you know what? It feels really good that I just told you. I got it off my chest. And she turned around and she started doing her things by herself, like she usually did. But she told me later, but I just felt like a big weight had come off. That I wasn't angry at him anymore, that I could accept it because I knew and I had the courage to say what was bothering me instead of letting it eat at her inside. Well, come to find out that her husband came over and watched that she never did yell at him, and she never did scream, and she never did the things she usually did. He came over and he started helping her and said to her, helping her with the dishes, and he said, I'm sorry, honey, I didn't know you were thinking I didn't love you, or my actions were making you think you didn't love you. And so their action was that sometimes he'd come home and he'd be really tired. But they would share. They would do things together. They would make a point of even having a date night where they get a babysitter and they go out and just be together themselves. That was their third A, action. And that's an individual thing, folks. That's not something a counselor or anybody can tell you. You two have to talk it through and find out what works for you. I saw a teenager once who came to me and said, I try to talk to my dad, but he's either watching a ball game or the news or something. And when I try to talk to him, he just, she wanted to see about getting driver's lessons so she could get a license. And he never had to listen to her. So we talked about this kind of thing. And so finally, she boldly stood in front of the TV and said, Dad, I know you want to watch this, and I'm not going to interrupt you long. I just want to say, when you choose the game or the news over listening to your daughter, that hurts. It makes me feel not very important in the scope of things in your life. And because he really just was afraid of her driving, and that had to come out. He finally said, no, honey, that's not true. I do care, and I have been avoiding talking to you about driving. So you see, that's communication. And he decided, okay, this weekend we'll take you out on a driver's lesson. And so, you see, not everything can be solved quite that simply, maybe. But that first lady, she thought she had to get divorced. I had a gentleman that come to me, and he was broken because his wife wanted a divorce. She didn't love him anymore. And he just was beside himself. And I didn't have both of them to talk about communication skills. And what we talked about? We talked about the fact of him getting alone with God. You focus on your relationship with God. Don't focus on fixing her or changing her ideas. Focus first in getting into your private room with God and talk to him. Cry to him. He cares. See if there's something in you maybe that God wants to change. And you want to know the beautiful thing? The more time he spent in the presence of God and in the Word of God, his wife noticed the difference. She noticed, and he even did kind things. She said, I'm going out with the girls. We're going to take a trip to someplace. And he said, not manipulating, just because he had been spending time with the Lord and learning how to be like Jesus. He said, I have frequent flyer miles you can use. And she kind of looked at him shocked. And the end of that story is he was different and she loved him. This is what she was missing. Maybe the kindness, the conversation, whatever. But folks, see what the point of that story is. Sometimes it's you. Sometimes you have to make some changes in your life. Sometimes we don't even realize that actions of ours may be saying something we don't mean to be saying to someone we love. And, we're different. and I'm not going to go into it, but there is some people that have published a thing called Your Love Language, and people, especially because of the background they came from, the way their parents reacted. I know some people, it's service, a wife just preparing a really nice meal, and that would really affect some people. Other people, it's words. Some people, it's gifts. Most people tell me it's just being together. They just want to take time and be together. Especially women. If a man is listening to this, listen to me. Women like to hear that they're loved. They like to hear, wow, you look pretty, honey. Things like that don't mean much to a man. I remember listening to Dr. Smalley, I think his name was, Gary Smalley, and he was saying sometimes what is a pebble to a man is a big boulder to a woman, and so those kind of things like words of love or affirmation are important to a woman. Find out what's important to the man if you're a woman. What really means a lot to him. And so, anyway, I guess you're getting the gist of it. And I hope I didn't. I have. I've gone too long. I'm so sorry. Counseling sessions are usually an hour. Forgive me. But I wanted to get it clear that in your relationships with whoever it is, learn to, first of all, put God first in your life. Second of all, make sure that you learn the right way to communicate to others. Okay? God bless you. If you have questions or there's areas you want me to talk to about relationships, let me know and we'll try to do that. Okay, God bless you. See you next time.